What's up, guys? This is the Good Soul Podcast. I'm so glad you're joining us today. The Good Soul Podcast, the whole point of this podcast really was to kind of bring in people that I have just really admired for a really long time. And today on the podcast, we have Johnny Lombardi. If you know it or not, you were actually, he's actually been my teacher before my last year of high school, and then really just became a really good friend. And I'm really excited that you're here on the podcast today. We are talking about, just creativity, but really in your avenue, you have been someone that I've really looked up to in what you've been doing. And Johnny is someone that you can look up to because he's so theologically, we can get in those topics, but then you also see him in the creativity, and really just to see that mesh is really astounding. And so, dude, just take it away, your elevator pitch of who you are.
Dude, I'm so thankful to be on this podcast, and as your former teacher, to see you build this space and to see what you're doing with your work in media,
Dude.
makes me so proud as a teacher to see that you and Camden and everybody. That's the greatest joy that a teacher can have, is to see your students be succeeding and be entrepreneurial and doing stuff like this. So
Yeah, bro.
You give me a lot of pride seeing what y'all are doing. Yep, I'm a teacher here locally at Denham Springs High School, director of DSTV, our student-run digital media and video production program. I've actually been doing that for 5 years. Before that, I went to LSU to major in sports broadcasting at the Manship School. Did that for 4 years at LSU, and after I graduated, I worked at WAFB Channel 9 here locally in Baton Rouge, covering LSU, covering Southern, covering high school athletics. I worked as a morning producer. I worked as a sports producer. Did a whole bunch of work there with Sportsline Friday night for about 3 years at Channel 9. And then after that, ended up transitioning out of the media industry and into education. Got hired back to move, actually went home to Chicago for a year, and then got hired by Denham Springs and came back here in fall of 2019 because there were 2 students at Denham Springs High School who were doing media stuff on their own.
That's insane.
They were doing media stuff on their own, and the school said, hey, we got these kids who are doing this stuff. We want to create a program for them, and we think that this would be something good for the school and the community. And that's how DSTV got started, because Caden May and a couple other guys were doing it. Y'all were doing it. Y'all were just doing it on your own. And then that's how this amazing program, got started 5 years ago.
That's crazy. You hyped me up as a legend,
You
doing all those different things.
Foundational legend of
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was such a fun experience to be able to do that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I love that your background, even me and Ben, when we were doing high school things, we're learning our craft. You're going through school and you're learning media as well, and then you become an educator in media. And I think that's so cool to even just kind of explore today of how not only do you create, but how do you teach people to create?
Yes,
and I think that's
very hard. They're 2 totally different things. It's like anything. You have a lot of people who are really good at something,
right?
But can they teach that to a younger person or to another person and boil it down? And that at the beginning, your year and my first couple of years, that was a big challenge, because for a lot of things that we do, it's like breathing,
right,
in Adobe with the camera,
right.
It's like breathing to us. But for somebody a kid who does no idea, being able to have the patience to step back and really boil it down and really kind of put in those steps of the process, that's kind of how you grow as an educator and as a teacher, by being able to really slow down, which I struggled with at the beginning for sure.
That's so interesting. So how would you define what you do in the education system? Because I know you work at the STEM Center and you do different classes. I've gone through your class, and I know that it's evolved over the past couple years of what that looks like to teach high school students. But what would you specifically define as what you do and create?
So we have DSTV, which is kind of on one hand is our student-run video production digital media program, which is kind of the main program that does a lot of the athletics coverage, school coverage, anything media-wise with Denham Springs High School, we're on it, with video, with photography, with graphic design, right? So we have all those departments that kind of work together in terms of creating content for the school and for athletics, branding, graphics, hype videos, recaps, cinematic stuff, documentaries, right? All that kind of happens in that higher level program of DSTV. On the other side, we have our film curriculum, our STEM film and TV curriculum. We have a basic film and TV class. Well, before that, we have digital storytelling, which is what we started with in your first year.
Right. I remember that.
And that's kind of like the entry-level media course that a lot of freshmen will go into. And then we have our basic film and TV class and our advanced film and TV class. And so the idea is that students come in on that base level as freshmen through digital storytelling, and then if they're interested, they stay in it into basic film, then up into advanced film, and then those students who are really, really loving it and maybe even have some outside of school experience doing media stuff, then they apply to get into DSTV and be a part of that big program. So there's kind of two paths that we have. The DSTV side is a lot more kind of like working, like when they come to class, like we're working. Obviously, you know, you're learning, but it's really more hands-on in the moment, experiential learning. Whereas film and TV, those classes are very process-oriented, very specific in terms of learning how to operate the camera, learning how to edit, learning how to use Adobe Premiere, the basics of what does it actually mean to have a camera and capture video images and then put them together to create something. So obviously learning happens in both of them, but the way that the learning happens is different in each of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you ever kind of step back and you're like, my main goal for this class is for them, if they don't learn anything else, is for this?
I guess it's the ability for them to think creatively and to understand how to take I guess here's an answer. How to take something that they think up in their head and like actually create it. And even if they move on to a different career path, and no matter what you do, you're going to be forced at some moment to kind of imagine or think up something for your business or for your career and have to translate that into an actual action step or a creative thing.
Wow.
Okay? So for me to get them through my class to take those steps of imagining something, thinking it up, putting it down on paper, planning it, and then executing it, I think that's a skill that can translate to any career path or field that they choose to go into.
That is so cool. I love that. That is I feel like you're not just teaching them like a way to create, you're teaching them to kind of be self-sustaining in that creating process.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you feel like is the biggest proponent in your classroom that teaches your students how to create?
I think it's the pre-production, the planning process. I think that's the biggest thing because everybody wants to hop into the turning on the cameras and let's film and act and laugh and have fun, and that's natural. Right. But getting them to slow down and say, okay, before we do that, we have to plan this out. We have to actually have like a vision for where we're going with this piece of content or media that we're making. It can't just fall together or happen. Right, we have to kind of have a plan that's not in concrete, not chiseled in stone yet, but we have to be able to kind of plan this out so that when we go do it, we're able to execute it at a higher level. I think that's a big part of it too, is getting them to slow down and plan and not just hop in and do. Right.
And how do you counteract that with like the rise of social media with reels and quick content? And it almost feels like, honestly, to me, it's annoying as someone who does videography for a living that I can spend hours on an edit and someone makes something in 2 seconds and it blows up.
Yes.
Like, how do you counteract that?
It's kind of funny you bring that up. That's kind of been a big point of debate between me and some of the DSTV students because they're all about the reels.
Right.
They're all about a 10-second, a 15-second reel on Instagram. And for me, like, I'm old school. I'm old fuddy-duddy. I'm like, 30 seconds of content. You know, you just shot 2.5 hours of football and you're going to cut something that's 15 seconds. Like, what a waste, you know? And so I guess it's balancing, okay, understanding the times and what is working now in terms of vertical video and reels and wanting to do some stuff with that, but also really trying to kind of teach them on the other side of like, okay, there's a whole nother world of cinematography and videography that's not vertical, that's not 10, 15 seconds, that's longer form, that's creative, that's story-driven, that's storytelling, and that still has an absolutely valid spot of what we do.
That's so good.
And so trying to teach them both, but also I'm not trying to, you know, close off on the newer stuff, but really trying to open their eyes to, you know, hey, you can create something, you know, longer than 15 seconds. And I think you talk about the speed of turnaround. I think that's a skill that in the professional atmosphere, at least coming from a news background, like you were taught and we had to learn how to turn stuff quickly. Like that's part of the job in news and in that kind of creative scenario.
It was like the information was the power of it. Like that was the...
Or like content creation, say for LSU athletics, right? If something big happens in a game, their creative people need to turn that video immediately. So it can go on social media in the moment. They can't wait till Monday morning or the next day because
Right.
the moment's gone, right? So kind of teaching them little things like that. Like, yes, there's a time for, say, in like documentary where you're slowly kind of chewing at this thing and you're building this and you're producing this, but then also the world of, hey, you got to be able to turn this content quickly
Right.
and get something up so that we can get eyeballs on what we shot, you know? And it's a balance.
I love that. That's so cool. And like we were even talking about this before, but I feel like there's so much purpose in what you're doing, and like even just the All Access documentary series, y'all need to check it out. I'm gonna put it down below in the description on YouTube. But the amount of effort and the high level quality that DSTV is pumping out, and it's you and some high school kids, and I don't want to say that in a derogatory way because they're really good, but the fact is that you're putting out like Netflix documentary series kind of stuff out of here. And I mean, I don't think there was any like of this expectation 5-6 years ago.
No, absolutely not. And I appreciate what you said about All Access. It's been a blast. It's been so much fun. It's been a great learning experience for our students of learning how to shoot tons of video,
Right.
learning how a narrative works. Like, how do we have a documentary story and go from A to B to C to D through a whole season, right? In the moment, and how to tell that story. So the kids learning that, and then how to tie it all together.
Right.
It's just been amazing. We had 14 different DSTV students play some kind of role in production of All Access throughout this year. Shot over 2,000 gigabytes of video from the whole season, from last summer to the state championship game and whenever that was in March. And so it was awesome, and the payoff has been so great of just the attention it's gotten from the basketball community in Louisiana. You know, we were at state in March, and we had, you know, media members from all over the state and different basketball media outlets coming up to our kids and congratulating them and talking to them about All Access. And like, for me, that was the best thing ever, just to see that, okay, this project has made an impact on the state, on girls basketball in Louisiana, and of course here in Denham Springs locally, our Lady Jackets and their families and our school. But back to what you were saying about 5-6 years ago, did I envision that DSTV would be doing full-length documentaries like Hard Knocks, Netflix style? Absolutely not, right? That was not the vision 5 years ago, you know, but I think that's kind of a testament to the program, is that we've been able to adapt each year and kind of figure out different things that we can do, figure out new projects, and taking, okay, what's something that's out there in the real world that we can kind of adapt and boil down to our level and to what works here locally. And so I think it's just been a great lesson of, you know, you may have this kind of vision and this idea of what the program could be back in 2019, and a lot of that stuff came true, but then there's also things where, hey, I didn't think it was going to look like this, but this is how it looks now, and being able to adapt and do those kind of things.
And I feel like the biggest thing that I'm just hearing from you is like, and the biggest thing I've seen from your work is you're really good at telling a story. I think that's what you try to teach your students, is narrative comes first before anything else.
Yes.
How and as a follower of Christ, and it just oozes into your work of just the integrity and the amount of teaching and discipling that you're being able to do through the school system. I mean, you don't have to even say the name of Jesus, but being able to pick up a camera and just the way that you can carry yourself, you're being able to be a light in dark places. And how do you feel like you being able to teach narrative over anything? And I've highlighted this before in another video of how teaching people how to tell stories is parallel to how Jesus would teach with stories, and how Jesus is inviting us into the greater narrative, and that I think stories have the greatest power. There's a quote that says that history is in the hands of the storytellers. And how do you feel like that quote and that kind of brings to what you're doing at DSTV?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, just teaching the kids how to do something with diligence and excellence. Like how to really value your work, how to value your purpose, and that your role or your work means something to God. It means something in general, right? And the way you carry yourself as a person growing up into a young adult, how you carry yourself matters, right? And how you know, the diligence of your work and the quality of it, that you can do that to honor of the Lord.
That's
right?
so good.
And so it doesn't need to be this like overly, you know, spiritual thing, but just like any job that you're doing, if you're doing it to your utmost, right, you're
Right.
doing it for a higher purpose than just for yourself or
Right.
just for, whatever it might be. And so I think teaching those little lessons of, how you approach work, how you approach storytelling, projects, teamwork, how do you deal with people who are different than you in a team setting, right? How are you able to relate and to form bonds and form a team to accomplish something in the
Right.
workplace,
Right.
And how do you, if you claim to be a Christian, how do you look different, sound different, treat people differently, bring people together differently, tell a story differently, right, to set yourself apart? I think those are all little things that I've been blessed to be able to kind of teach in general of how you can honor your Lord with your work and how you can work hard and diligently, but then also how you treat people,
Yeah.
how you work in a team setting. And then, to what you were saying about narrative and storytelling, right? That is the essence of creativity,
Right.
right? Can you capture people? We'll talk about this a lot later, but can you capture people's hearts and minds with a story,
Right.
right? And then the information in that story. And that's just kind of a huge part of how we do it, and
Yeah.
trying to get people to see something that maybe they didn't see before,
Right.
or see something out of something physical that they'd never interpreted that way, or they
Right.
never thought of that way.
Right. Yeah. The late Tim Keller, he said this in one of the books I've read. He said, we used to you would think that to be a Christian, say plumber, you have to do your job and preach the gospel there. But to be a Christian plumber, fill in the blank, it is to do your job well.
Yep.
That the spiritual and the natural were meant to coexist. That's what the Garden of Eden was. It was heaven and earth meeting, and that it was sin that broke that apart. And then through union with Christ, through Jesus dying on the cross, that means that our work has purpose. And so I don't think, and it's very, there's a term for it. I think it's like a Greek dualism of like you have your work and you have your spiritual life. And even though we know in America we have the separation of church and state, and I know there are lines that you have to kind of really be careful with as a teacher, but I know that the Holy Spirit, he loves to, even in the boundaries that the government places, there is so much light to be shining. And just to be a light is a testament of Christ. And I think to touch on narrative, as Christians, we get to teach narrative because we've been invited into the greatest narrative of redemption. And I think the greatest stories, the greatest movies, if you watch The Avengers, if you watch even stories like Harry Potter or different things, why it's so compelling to us is because there's a overarching redemption story to it, that someone that comes out of obscurity or comes out of not being liked by the public and comes through this redemption arc. And I think that's what the whole thing is, that we're invited into the story, but we're not the main character.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a great segue into one of your other questions about the future of media and Christian media, I guess, in general, or Christian, storytelling, is that really for the last 40, 50 years, Christians kind of abdicated the creative space
Right.
in the world and just kind of just gave that over to
Right.
the secular world. They just said, you all can have this. We're going to stop
You saw that in the
doing things.
crappy movies in the 90s.
Well, that's what I was about to. So, like, you have the cringy Christian movies, the
Right.
cringy Christian books. You have, all this stuff that was created that it just wasn't good.
Right.
It's just not high quality production. Well, you're not capturing people's hearts and minds with any of that stuff, right? It may be done by the most holy, kind-hearted, theologically correct people, but if it's not done with excellence,
Right.
people aren't going to consume it, right? And so then where is media being consumed with excellence? Marvel, Disney, Harry Potter.
Right.
All these different secular places are creating excellent content, right? And they are capturing people's hearts and minds.
Right.
Right? And then the church looks around and wonders why we're in the state that we are in the world. Well, because you stopped being able to capture people's hearts and mind from
Right.
a creative standpoint. You
Right.
completely abdicated that area
Dude.
to the world. And, if we would think it would be the opposite. Like, we have the truth.
Right.
We have the good, the true, and the beautiful, right?
Right.
To show people creatively to tell that story, yet it's the other side that is the better storytellers.
Right.
They're better at portraying a story and compelling people with a story, and so I think that's an area where we
Wow.
talk about the future of Christian media, and there are some ministries that are doing a better job of this now and have kind of realized the blind spots of the last 30, 40 years, and trying to kind of gain some of that back. But it's going to be a long haul, because it's just you're up against a lot, and you've kind of been irrelevant in the creative space,
Right.
and creating good content that's doctrinally and theologically sound, that has good orthodoxy, right? But that is also well done and compelling,
Wow.
and teaches a hot gospel and shows people God's word in a creative way. I think that capturing people's hearts and minds does not mean itching their ears. Right?
Yes.
So you do not have to compromise to tell good stories or to produce good Christian visual content, art, whatever it might be, books. You don't have to itch people's ears. You don't have to water it down, right? Because it's the truth.
Right.
We know that the truth will pierce people's hearts.
Right.
Okay. So there's no reason why you think I gotta compromise on this so that people will consume my stuff.
Wow.
You just need to trust God and say, okay, well, I'm gonna produce this. And it will have its effect, right? So I think it's definitely an area where the church will need to grow in the next immediate future, and I think a lot of people are waking up to that reality of the secular world tells much more compelling stories and
Right.
produces much more excellent visual media art content than the church, for the most part,
Right.
has done or does. And so I think that's an area where creatives who are Christians kind of need to wake up and say, okay, like, what are we doing? Whether it's a ministry, whether it's a church, whether it's an independent person or whatever, how are we doing this as a whole?
Right. I think because creativity has a way about it that can capture people, and so you're casting a net. The world's either casting a net or we're casting a net.
Yeah.
And I think it's we've equated, especially in the past couple decades, they've equated good content or good film or anything with the world, and so then we're running in like, well, it's just got to be dry, it's got to be just it has to just be the word, and it's like, well, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, it can be captivating. I love that you just said that. It can be captivating and it not itch ears. Like, it's meant to be the fresh bread, the real true gospel.
Think about like something like Lord of the Rings,
Right.
written by a Christian, okay? So tells a redemptive kind of story arc with many Christian themes throughout it, but also is not like explicitly the Bible or Christian in the the dialogue or in the whatever,
Right.
So it doesn't have to be like this kind of, like you just said, like explicit Christian content to be a good story that points people to themes of the Bible,
Right.
and themes of the Lord.
That's so good.
Right.
And like in the beginning of the podcast, you said the number one goal that you want your students to do is to take an idea from their head and make it tangible, make it real, make it something that it is. And I think that's a great definition of creativity. And it doesn't have to just be someone who's in film or a graphic designer or whatever, because there's a lot of visual arts when we think of creative, but a creative could be someone who wants to start a coffee shop or like creating an atmosphere where you're inviting people in to excellency, but also an invitation that's other than this world.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen that. We have friends in Hammond, that the Luma coffee shop, you go in there, it's an unmatched vibe or atmosphere, really. Because it's just like, it's a atmosphere of peace, and they've created something as Christians. They've created the best coffee around, and so it's like, do something with excellency, and that will be a testament of God's glory. That we've forgotten that good work is also glorifying God. Not like, it's all glorifying God, not just you saying, "Oh, Jesus died on the cross." Like, yes, that glorifies God when you say it like that, but also you're trying to prepare the hearts of people.
Yeah, and so it's not always. I think the church also struggles with this. It's not always theological. It's the application.
Right.
Right. So if we're not teaching people to taking the theology and the truths of the gospel and of the Bible, but we're not actually showing them how to apply that to their home, to their parenting, to their work, to their business, to their creativity, well, then it's not going to go anywhere.
Wow.
Right? And so it's the application of those principles and it's the application of those things that actually get people to honor God with their work, honor God in their home, create those spaces that are God glorifying, and be able to kind of do those things as Christians with boldness and with creativity, but without kind of the kitschy, cheesy, cringiness that we have been around for a while. Let's just put it like that.
Right. And it's not because there's extremes to that. You have the people like, it doesn't have to be cringy, but it also doesn't have to be, you're not also trying to be so relevant.
Yes.
Like you don't have to be so on the trend.
There's two ditches.
And I've seen my fair share of pastors or worship leaders or creatives that have been trying to be so trendy that they become heretical. And it's like, you don't have to be either of those. You don't have to be cringy and you don't have to be trendy. There is a beautiful, beautiful artistry that's in that middle stream. Yeah. And I think that's more nuanced, but it's something that I think is not taught.
Yeah. No,
that
I
is in that
agree.
middle
I
ground of
completely.
cringy or trendy. Because it's like, oh, I don't want to be cringy, so I have to be trendy. And it's like, well, no, there's also this middle section of like, there's a certain part of you that like we don't believe in the follow your heart, do whatever. It's like, no, like we believe that we are under one Lord and we want to do what He's called us to do, but He's also given us unique abilities. Like I think one of the biggest things that you have as a unique ability is to create culture. The buy-in, and you say that buzzword a lot, but the buy-in of the culture that you create, you literally have a new set of students every single year, and they get to buy in to this culture that you've created at DSTV. Yeah. Is there anything that you could teach if someone listening, they're at a church, they're creative at a church or a creative trying to start a business, and they're trying to disciple people? How could you teach them, or it's just something like a nugget of wisdom of teaching them to create a culture that people buy into?
That's a great question. I think it's a really good question. I think having a standard, and that's super cliche in itself, but understanding, okay, like what is our vision for what we want to create and build, right? It goes back to that imagination point from earlier, right? You as a leader and a culture setter, you have to be able to set that vision in front of people, right? Or else they don't know, where they're going. But if you say, okay, here's what we're aiming for, A, B, and C, these things. Here's the standard of our work in this environment, and here's going to be the standard of our brand or whatever your goals are going to be, and you just repeat that vision enough, and you keep repeating it, and you keep reminding people, and you keep saying, okay, this is it, this is what we're aiming for. They're going to buy in, and they're going to go along for the ride if you show them where they're going, right? That's the epitome of a leader, I think, is being able to tell people, here's where we're going. Right. Here's the vision. And here's how we're going to get there.
I think there's a lot of that missing in the church.
Yes.
And in ministries in general that aren't just church related, but just any ministry. I think we forget that you need to show vision. Like people perish for a lack of vision.
Yeah. And I have a standard and a set of goals, and it changes, right? It like my goals for DSTV in 2019 were not the same as they are now moving forward. Right. Things evolve and things change, and so it's a balance of here's our vision, here's kind of our foundational standard pieces, but then also here's where we can adapt, and here's where we can grow, and okay, maybe let's look in this, but the overall culture doesn't change, right? The foundational standards of how you built something, those stay the same. The application might be different, and the things you build on top of that might change as years go by and times change and locations change, different things change. But the people who are new and they come in, they're coming into a standard that's set, right? In DSTV, for example. So they're coming in not building a new standard. You're coming in and you're fitting into a standard that you built and all these other students built over the last 5 years.
Wow.
You're fitting into that standard and then operating with your giftings inside that standard.
Wow. That's so good. How do you find the humility to, you have your standard, but then things have to be tweaked over time? How do you find that humility to see change throughout the years?
That is a great question, and that's difficult because, like I was saying earlier, with the reels and the stuff, it's been a point of contention with the students because they're young, and so how they consume stuff is different than how I consume
Right.
stuff. Okay, so humility for me is saying, all right, I maybe don't fully understand how a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid is consuming video content on social media nowadays because it's different than what I did when I was in high school. It's certainly different than then. It's also different than me now.
Right.
So having the humility to say, okay, let me hear you out. Let's talk about it. Let's see what we can do. Let's, and I think that going back to buy-in, when I give them that kind of trust and that kind of platform, it helps them buy in because they feel respected enough that, okay, I was able to share my idea and my vision and my thought for this program because, my students care about DSTV and I want them to have that ownership of it where they feel like that they can have bold ideas and have some sort of say in things that we try or things that we are able to produce content for, right? Because I'm not perfect. I have blind spots. Like I'm, my age and I'm going to miss things that they're seeing and saying, hey, this is hot right now. We need to be doing something with this right now because it's going to help the team. It's going to help the brand, not just them individually, not just me individually, but it's going to help the brand. It's going to help the school, the community. If we can, get this hot thing that's on TikTok or Instagram or whatever right now, if we can do something with this, it'll trend and it'll go. And so I think the humility for me as an adult to say, okay, I may have a good idea of how I want things to be done and how I think adults in their spheres will take some of our content in the community, but also understanding, okay, like these kids have a pulse on their age group that I do not have, and being able to empower them with some trust to be creative, to take some ownership and some leadership, and to kind of guide us into those things. And, things like that are different than when you were in high school, and certainly in 5 years from now, it'll probably be different stuff than what it is now.
Right.
But constantly being able to kind of humble myself and give them empowerment to a certain degree. To work inside, again, the foundation and the system, that doesn't change. But how we create maybe does change as years and time goes by.
Wow. I feel like just to kind of like reiterate what you just said, like sparking, it's almost as if to truly spark creativity in students, and this can, it can apply in any area of life. For anyone that's listening, to foster creativity in people's life is to give them that responsibility, to let their fingerprint be on that.
And that's a big thing in leadership too, is I never, as the teacher, I am an authority figure in the classroom, in the program. Okay, so there is a certain level of authority that I have to have in terms of holding this together, right? But I never want my role as in DSTV to be just browbeating students into, this is what you're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, you're going to do it exactly like this, the way I want it done, X, Y, and Z. Because that doesn't empower them to value or to care about the brand, right? The logo, right? I always my goal is always, okay, discipline and structure, control, okay? Not over, when I mean control, I mean just like managing as an adult.
These are the guidelines.
Yes. Right, but inside these guidelines, I want you guys to have ownership and be excited and be creative and care about this thing that we're doing because it's working. It's been working for 5 years. But if the students don't have that fire and that excitement and that care about it, then it's not worth it. It's just me doing my thing, and that's just not what it's about,
Dude, and I'm just making this connection, but there's such a parallel to like Jesus and his commandment to go and make disciples. That like it was this like freeing thing of like you have to put your fingerprint on this. That he gets the glory, but it's this this merge together of both of us, that like it's Christ in me doing it, but I still have to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's with creativity and with anything. It's that he's allowing us, just like as you're saying with your students, hey, you're going to get some responsibility in this. You need to put your fingerprint on it, and therefore you're going to care about it. Like that's the goal of it, is your heart's in it. And I think that's what Christ does. I think that's what Jesus does in our life is, hey, you're going to get some responsibility in this. You're going to put your fingerprint on this, and you're going to care for my mission to go and make disciples. And I think that's disciple is such a rigid term, but really, or like a term that we don't use very often, but really, you're just calling people into the life of Jesus.
And we talk about Jesus in the new covenant. You have these guidelines, and then there's this space in the middle, right? The law is a mirror to our sinfulness, right? But we're not under the law,
Right.
But the law still matters, right? Because it's a mirror. But then in this new covenant, hey, here are the guidelines. Here's the parameters,
Right.
okay? And then inside this, you
Right.
have movement and creativity, and you have a degree of freedom inside of the parameters and the guidelines that the Lord has set up.
That's so good. And there's so
Right.
many people. So many times someone comes up to me and they go, "Well, what does the Bible say about this?" And it's like, well, the Bible gives you a lot of wisdom, but there's not rules for it. Like with drinking, someone said, "Well, is it sinful to drink?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't tell you that the Bible says it's sinful to drink.
It says it's sinful to get drunk.
To get drunk.
It doesn't say it's sinful to drink.
So the parameter is drunk.
Yes.
So drunk's over here, and never touching a sip of alcohol is over here. The creativity is in this of
wisdom.
Of wisdom, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I cut you off, but that's a perfect example of what I was trying to say of something like that. Of there are these parameters, and then inside of that, there's wisdom.
Right.
Right.
Wow, I feel like what you're doing at DSTV is such a good insight of what anyone could do in the secular or in ministry or and really what you're doing is a ministerial type, because you're being able to just be a light to these kids. But really anyone listening, they can see that this is this is the most freeing thing, that as a leader we get to just give responsibility, as Jesus is being able to give us responsibility. Like I feel like I'm a kid, and he's like, here you go, here's my spirit just inside of you. Like the God of the universe is like, I want to just live in you and give you power and
use you for my purposes that I've already ordained.
Absolutely insane.
Crazy.
Absolutely insane. And I think as creatives, I'm biased. I think, and I keep wanting to make this definition of creative open, because I think anyone can be creative. But then there's also this stipulation is I think creatives have this superpower that I said on the last episode, to foster intimacy. I believe that when we create, we're able to show our heart, just like when Jesus came to the earth, he's like, here's the Father's heart. Like when we create, we're like, hey, this is the heart of God. And we have this thing that you don't get to see in some rigid thing. And
or even the idea of like getting people to stop and think. Like
Yes.
you create something that somebody has to sit and interact with
Yes.
and read and interpret or watch or look at, and they have to chew on that in their heart, in their mind, and say, how do I deal with this? What is this?
Right.
Right. That's a unique ability as a creative person, whatever the topic, if it's theological, if it whatever, and X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Whatever you produce and create, somebody is interacting with that when they view it and watch it, and it is getting them to think and feel all sorts of different things.
Right.
That,
Creativity has this knack for making people become introspective in a moment.
Yeah.
Like there's this way of kind of digging at a thing in your heart, and everyone has, it says in Romans 1, everyone has this longing for God in their heart, if they want to admit it or not, but they have this longing that they've been trying to fill. And I think creativity knocks those walls down.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it in videos and in photography and even in architecture or in people making furniture. I mean, I was reading a book about the author was saying he cried one time he just was overcome by the Spirit, looking at a chair and how beautiful it was, and giving glory to God by just how beautiful the chair was. And it's like, it sounds silly, but really what he was doing is he was looking at something that was created, and he was giving glory to ultimate creator.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we get to do with our life.
Yeah. The good, the true, and the beautiful, right? We have all three of those things in the Lord, okay? So getting people to see those things and have their heart be open to them, whether it's explicitly Christian or not, right? Whether it's just great content with great, robust doctrine and theology that is right in your face,
right?
Or if it's something less so in your face, but it's excellent and it's beautiful and it points to true themes. Both of those are effective. Both of those will pierce the hearts of people that God can use to get to the hearts of people.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not up to us. It's not up to me or you. This video has to be perfect enough because people need to get saved watching this thing or whatever it might be. That's not how it works, right? God's sovereign. We're just obedient to create and to be truthful and to be obedient, and we trust that God will take care of the results, that the Lord will use whatever is created and whatever purposes he has for whoever is consuming it to have his will be done, and it will be done.
One of the biggest things I've struggled with, I think, in my life as a creative is comparison. To see, and constantly, especially with social media, to see people put out good work, I can see my selfishness go, man, why didn't I create something like that?
Oh, yeah.
And to create out of selfishness is almost like counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I've seen it stretched into the church. I've seen it stretched into creatives as a whole, and it's like a parasite. How do you see people combating comparison in this generation?
I think it's a massive issue.
Yeah.
Like you said, with social media, where we are just inundated with other people's work. Okay, so there's a positive side of that. You get to see all this great work that's being done all over the world in a moment.
Yeah.
Okay, and we get to take that in and learn from it and enjoy it and love it and let it minister to us. Okay, the other ditch on the other side is the bitterness and jealousy taking roots, and frustration of the comparison of, oh, they're better than me. I'll never be that good. Why didn't I think of that? How come they're getting all the clicks? How come they're getting all the attention? How come that their reel went viral and mine didn't?
Right.
All those sorts of things are real feelings and they're real struggles, you know? So for me, I've got lots of friends from college who are working really cool media jobs all over the country, right? I have lots of really great friends who work in LSU athletics who do unbelievably incredible work, video work, photo work for LSU athletics. If I were to allow their status or their skills, their talents, their path to drive jealousy and bitterness in my heart, it would destroy my ability to be content with where God has me.
Wow.
It would destroy my ability to create genuine content that's mine, and not always trying to compare, well, they did it this way, so I need to do it like this, or how come they get that platform and I don't get that platform? Right. That sin destroys hearts, and it will destroy your creativity. It'll destroy your work, because then you're not operating out of contentment with where God has you. You're operating out of jealousy. You're operating out of selfishness. You're operating out of covetousness. You're coveting somebody else's status, someone else's platform, without being content of where, okay, God has me here. Right. God has called me to be a teacher, to educate kids in where I'm gifted. Right. Okay. And so I think it's a huge thing for young creatives and any creatives really to really guard in their heart and say, okay, where am I maybe becoming bitter or jealous of other people's creativity, other people's stuff? And it's hard sometimes, man. It's like you see stuff and you're like, man, why can't I edit that good? Why can't I shoot that good? Like, why can't I have that equipment? Man, I wish I could do that. And I think going back to kind of to ditches, on one side is, we should, when we see someone's work, admire it and say, okay, how can I emulate that? Right. How can I learn from how this person did it? Right. And improve myself. Right. Right. We don't want to just be, I'm just going to be in my doldrums here. I'm just going to do what I do. And, and whatever happens, I want to be actively like, hey, that person's really talented. Right. How can I learn from that person? That's good. How can I glean wisdom from how they edit, how they shoot? How can I challenge myself to get better in my craft, to become more excellent in what I create, without, again, on the other side, letting my heart be jealous, be bitter, be covetous, envious of what they're doing, but be able to say, wow, the Lord's really blessed them with that gift, and they're really, really good. How can I humble myself, trust God, and learn from them, and make myself better? Not because I want to accomplish something or get somewhere or somewhere else, but back to what we talked about at the beginning, to create excellent work that pleases the Lord. Wow. To give God glory by giving my best effort every single day when I step into work. Right. Whether that's creating media content, whether that is hosting a podcast, whether it's teaching, whatever it is. How can I learn from others and humble myself and get better and guard against bitterness and
Right.
sin and jealousy.
Right. And what do you think the effect of creating without jealousy would look like?
Purity. You can create with no strings attached. There's no you have authenticity and something that is created out of a genuine heart that is not compromised. It's not talk about like sowing and reaping. If you're sowing with bitterness, even in what you're creating, you're going to reap that bitterness eventually.
Wow.
Like you don't think that that's going to corrupt you
Wow.
in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so guarding against that and creating out of a pure heart and out of a genuine, authentic, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
This is my creation that I have created
Right.
through God, okay, or God through me, and being content with yourself. I think it comes with I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I totally just blanked. It comes with knowing yourself and knowing your abilities and knowing your giftings and being comfortable with that and okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay, that God's called me to do this.
Right.
He hasn't called me to do this.
Right. That's so good. I love that. Yeah, because comparison will kill every bit of potential that you have.
Yes.
And the whole point is for us to be stewards of what we've already been given. And I'm reading a book right now. It's actually super, like, I didn't even think it was going to be this weighty, but it talks about art and faith, like the connection of both of those. And it talks about how farmers, before they are to plant the seed, they fix the soil. And so he lives in upstate New York where you have to fix the soil if you want to plant anything. And they'll plant like alfalfa or different plants in the wintertime to create pockets of nitrogen for when they go in the springtime, they're planting the seed. And he said, and he parallels to Matthew 13, there was no problem in that story about the seed that Jesus was sowing. It was about the soil, that the location of each soil or the condition of each soil was the determining factor if fruit was going to be bared or not. And I think that is the point of comparison. Comparison kills the soil. It's doing the opposite of fixing the soil.
Yeah.
You're destroying what God is trying to plant in you, because God is always trying to talk to us, always trying to speak with us, always trying to teach us things. And I think that's the point that
to make us into his image.
Yes,
He's always
yes.
trying to reform you and teach you and
Yes.
to turn you to make you more Christ-like.
Yes.
Even in work and in art and in creating, especially.
Yeah, and creatives, especially in my own personal life, the Holy Spirit, when He's talking to me, like I get this blend of like ideas for videos and things to write in journals and like things He's teaching me in Scripture and things I want to write, I want to like make into video things, and all that kind of blends together. And I think if I'm harboring offense or bitterness in my heart, that's the blockage and the stopping of creativity to flow, and then in turn actually to impact people. And if I'm actually trying to create through bitterness, I'm not going to do the thing I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to not create. I'm not going to create good stuff. It's going to be junk.
Yeah, that's really good. And whatever you do create is not going to be genuine.
Right.
It's not going to be authentic.
Right.
It's going to be corrupted in some form. And, people may be able to get away with that for a little bit. That's not a long-term sustainable condition of your heart to be operating out of that for long term. Eventually that is going to crash and burn, and it's going to be exposed, right? And so you might as well get that out of your heart now on the front end and really work on being discipled in contentment of heart, contentment of where God has you, contentment with whatever. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy, especially as a young person, where you have all these goals and aspirations and all these different external things. But that's just kind of where discipleship comes in and where growing in the Word comes and maturity.
Right.
It's all part of growing in maturity.
That's so good.
And it's a journey. It definitely is a journey. I mean, I'm 30 and I still struggle with checking my heart of, can't get bitter, can't compare, got to trust where I'm at and really love where I'm at. And
Wow.
it's a battle. It's a journey forever.
Wow. Dude, thank you so much for jumping on the pod, man.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really honored. And again, like I said at the beginning, just super proud of you, proud of everything that you're doing, and just super thankful to be where I am in life right now and in my work and being part of this local community. It's just really been great. And I just really believe in, what's being done locally here in Denham Springs is really going to be positive, and that we're building something that hopefully people want to move and be a part of. So
I love that. Love you, bro.
Come on. Love you, bro. You the man.